Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Birthday Cake for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes, and for episode 48, it's a delight to feature our special guest, Manchester-based American songwriter and multi-instrumentalist, B.C. Camplight. A Mancunian in his own right, B.C. Camplight, a.k.a. Brian Christinzio, assume I'm pronouncing that right, Brian, has been up north for over a decade, in that time putting out a handful of choice releases under tastemaker label Bella Union. In June 2025, BC Camplight put out his latest opus, A Sober Conversation, a very personal record that deals with themes of sobriety and child abuse. Having referred to childhood trauma obliquely on past records, the latest release has the subject front and centre. Rather than conduct the interview over Zoom, it was a pleasure to speak with Brian from his back garden in South Manchester on a lovely summer's day. Whilst his sweet dog Frank slept soundly on my lap, we got into it pretty deep with Brian, covering the very serious topics of the record, but also his friendship with Badly Drawn Boy, the perils of social media, misogyny in the music industry, and working with his partner. If you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform and follow Birthday Cake for Breakfast on all the socials. Give us a rating, drop us a comment, fling open the window and tell the neighbours, etc. Right, on to BC Camplight. Enjoy. So yeah, thanks very much for having us. You know, we're in South Manchester at your house, which is rather novel. What's it been like having these people come round to your house and in your space? I appreciate pre-mic we were just talking about one of these encounters, but yeah, how is that, having that sort of...
It's an awful intrusion of prep. No, it's fine, you know. I'm a pretty private person, and I don't like. I'm not nearly as boisterous as I am on stage or on record, but yeah, I'm not really precious about things. So I just, if people want to talk to me, that's a hell of a lot better than the alternative.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, come on over.
And with your dog Frank, who's sat next to me as we speak, getting a stroke, is that ever an issue with people who come round for
Yeah, it was
interviews?
an issue with the last guy. He was allergic to dogs.
Oh, great.
And Frank kept jumping up on his lap. Yeah, and he's the guy that stayed for 5 hours.
Oh,
But
the guy from Rolling Stone in America. Gotta
yeah.
let him stay.
Yeah. Yeah, but Frank's so sweet. If somebody came here and they didn't like Frank, then they know where the front door is.
Probably not worth knowing.
Yeah.
So speaking of Frank, you know, once upon a time we used to live in Whalley Range, me and my partner, and we used to enjoy seeing you. I say we used to enjoy it, saw you like twice, but used to find it funny, like seeing you out and about, but like as a dog walker, not a musician, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had, you know, similar encounters where people were like, oh, it's BC Camplight. Did you ever have anyone come up and, you know, you're holding like a bag of shit and someone said, hey, you know, can we get this? Can we do that? Or...
Yeah, I think that exact thing happened, and I had to reference the bag of shit that I was holding just to kind of defuse the situation. I'm like, hey, you caught me here holding a bag of shit. We kind of have a running joke, my partner Jess and I, who's in that window up there, is I do get people kind of quite often coming up to me, but it almost never happens when Jess is around. So I think Jess thinks that I'm making it up. Like, she'll go to the bathroom and like somebody will like just seemingly come out of the wall and be like, I really like your record. And then Jess comes back out of the bathroom and it disappears into smoke. But actually about 5 minutes before you got here, somebody screamed it across the street.
Oh, really?
And then Jess went, oh, cool, yeah, it happened. Yeah, it's good. I'm in a different phase of my life where I'm moving away from external validation and ego and all of that stuff. But every now and again, it's a good boost.
It must be nice to have it there, even if your partner never sees it.
Yeah.
It always used to be funny as well, because like you'd be walking around Alexandra Park, and I know that someone used to live there who used to put bands up, but you'd see one day like members of Duds just having a chat on the grass, or like a guy from Flatworms was walking around the park, and it just seemed like quite interesting that you'd have all these Six Music you know, residents just walking around Alexandra Park or around Chorlton as they do now.
did you ever have that on the other side of things where you're walking down, you know, Alexandra Park, let's say, and there's Jane Weaver or, you know, someone like that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Duds, the guitarist in my band, is from Duds.
I remember
And-
seeing with the long hair, yeah.
Yeah, and Jane Weaver is somebody who I worked with.
Mm.
I played on, I think, a couple of her records. But yeah, I think the most notable one was probably seeing Damon Bailey Drum Boy for the first time. We were in Trough,
Yeah.
so that wasn't around here, but it was in Manchester. And for some reason, I played this whole scenario in my head that he wasn't like going to like me or something, or that he had kind of ignored me. First of all, this was 11 years ago when nobody knew who I was anyway. I don't know why I would have thought that he knew me. So I built this kind of thing in my head. And I was like, you know, somebody referenced Bailey Drum Boy. I'd be like, yeah, I really like him. He hates me. You know, and now like we couldn't be closer really. And I don't know if you saw today, but he's
The big announcement,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I tend to do that with. It's another thing I'm working on in therapy is immediately building conclusions and stories in my head based off of little to no evidence. So I'm trying to get around that.
It is a funny one, and I imagine, I'm sure we'll come to it later, but do you think what the theme of the records is about in part, do you think that might have been something that was a hindrance with coming up with conversations in your head about how people are going to react to you? Or
do you mean the theme of the record? Do you think
you know, the other side of the sobriety aspect, you know?
Yeah. Are you asking, was I aware that people might have that in mind when they...
No, you know, like you said that you kind of came up with a conversation in your head.
Yeah.
Which people do, you know, if someone doesn't open the door for you, you ultimately go to a place where they've done it on purpose. But do you think that was like maximized because of, you know, being on booze or being on drugs, that maybe you might have had that where it was heightened?
I think it was the other way around. I think I was on booze and drugs because I was not in control of those kind of feelings. It wasn't till sort of recently, it's been 2 years now, where I've, for a lot of reasons, learned how to try to get answers from myself. And it's been a real kind of revelation, because even in my music, kind of all of my albums up until this one, there was an element of me, at least a percentage of me, worrying about how other people would perceive the music. And you know, I'm still being true to myself, but unfortunately that self was worried about what other people thought, and was worried about being perceived as good at what I did. And you know, please don't quote me as calling myself a genius, but when people would say like the tortured genius thing, there was a piece of me that was like, yeah, that's right. Nobody gets me, man. I'm just a tortured genius, you know. And I just been getting pretty bored of that stuff. And I think kind of one can lose so much going through life with that attitude that I had, and kind of default blaming the world for your own problems. And I knew that something wasn't right with the way I was approaching the world. And one of those things was not really dealing with my past and things like that, but I found it much easier to revel in this character, I guess, of being slightly out of control, and fucking boy did I live up to that character for a long time. And being on drugs was kind of a brilliant way of not having to deal with myself, you know, and at the same time reinforcing this character. And I think this record is kind of the first time where I could give a fuck what anybody really thinks about it. I want it to do well, you know, and I still kind of stress of like, I hope enough people hear it. But there was never a time in the writing or anything like that where I thought, you know what, this isn't going to get to these people, or they won't think I'm cool because I'm singing about this childhood stuff. And like, you know, it's just all gone. And what's left is, it just feels like a very kind of real and kind of condensed version of BC Camplight that I'm really digging at the minute.
And it must be pretty powerful, not just personally, but for the, you know, the development of BC Camplight, that you're able to be in that situation where you can be free to say, I do care what people think in the sense of my fan base and an audience, but I also don't care what people think because it's the true yourself. Yeah.
I think there's this, I have to separate the business from the art, and it's okay to care about, it's okay for me to acknowledge that this is my job, and I want to maximize all of my opportunities in that aspect. But I've kind of determined that it's no longer okay for me to make any turns on musically on behalf of anyone but myself. Yeah, and it's just been brilliant, really. It's been very hard. It's like once you make that promise to yourself that you're going to really dive as deep as you can into yourself, there's kind of no turning back, or it's probably not going to end up how you want it. It's going to be a bit half-baked. So unfortunately, and unfortunately in this case, I don't really know how to go halfway with things. You know, when I was, I guess I'll always be an addict, but when I was doing drugs and stuff, like, I couldn't just do a little bit and come home at midnight, you know, come home at 6 a.m. and like, but the flip side of that is, like, now that I've determined that this is what I'm going to do, I went full bore, and I've, like, delved into territories that aren't necessarily, maybe my radio pluggers weren't going like, "Oh, this is going to be the hit of the summer," you know. But that's fine, you know. There's other people that do that. It's just important to me that when it's all kind of said and done, that I'm proud of myself, and, you know, continue to just get better at what I do. It's like I'm scared shitless of getting worse.
Of getting worse
at music.
Yeah.
As a songwriter, like, if I put out a record that I don't think is at least as good as the one before, I do worry about that in the future, because it's going to happen. You know, you know, I don't know anybody who just put out a record every 2 years and we're like, oh my God. And, you know, I worry about how I'm going to handle that mentally, but hopefully I will have built a bit more of a, I will have been at this kind of self-discovery mode long enough where I can handle it. But I do think about that.
It's interesting that, because by the sounds of it, you're saying the not doing things by halves. It doesn't sound like you would allow yourself anyway to, unless you had a huge deadline that was, you know, right around the corner. But yeah, that seems like maybe you yourself could be happy with it, even if it didn't do well. Do you think that might be the case, or?
Yeah, I think, getting back to your deadline thing, everyone's fairly certain that I'm ADHD. I think I was diagnosed with it when I was a teenager, and then not medicated, and then kind of forgot about it for all of my formative years, and made lots of bad life choices probably on behalf of ADHD. But one of the things is I don't work without a deadline. I can't do it. So even this record, and every record I've ever done, was done at the 11th hour. I'm not one of these guys that's like carries a guitar around to the party and like, yeah, listen to this new song, man. Like, it's not my thing. I kind of live my life. I think about where I want to go with the record, and then trust that at the 11th hour, my brain will go, all right, here you go, Bri. And so far it's worked. But one time I'm going to walk up to the faucet with the cup, and rust is going to come out. I know it, but I'm just preparing myself for that. But it's just funny that my brain goes to that after having the record out a week. You know, it's like I'm still very much in this record, and I'm thinking, man, I fucked up the next record. Like it hasn't even happened yet. But yeah.
You mentioned the radio pluggers, and elsewhere you've mentioned, you know, some trepidation that putting out the record could scare the industry off, so to speak. Some, you know, tongue-in-cheekness there, but when you're looking at the record in the future and you're thinking, right, I'm going in head first and I'm going to do it this way and this is what it's going to be about, is that, you know, ever something that might like put the roadblock in the way, or do you think, yeah, I'm just going to go through it regardless?
Well, luckily, like I'm always going to have kind of pop sensibilities. They're just kind of ingrained. I don't think I'm at the risk of making a record that's just the sound of me making mashed potatoes or something. So that's not something that I have to force. It's any time where there's something that's been kind of on the radio or done well there is usually kind of a natural thing. I don't worry about that kind of going away. I think when it is hard to make records that are poignant and have enough left turns and keep people interested and keep myself interested most importantly, whilst you're trying to deal with really dark subject matter. So one thing that really changed on this record is it's more linear and there's less wackiness, which kind of, one reason for that is that I don't think that I need to have like kind of, you call them cheap moments on songs to keep people's attentions, where there's like, you know, my second record was just like, if I thought a verse was getting a little bit boring, it'd be like a fucking bomb exploding or something. Just like, I was always just doing something like, listen to me. This album, like, that would have done a real big disservice to the lyrical aspect to the record, which I think is the album's big strength. So yeah, I had to really fine-tuning, weighing up how interesting can we make this sonically without it distracting from what I'm saying. So there's lots of that stuff that goes on, and that's the stuff I'm really concerned about. I know that there was always going to be an element of pop to my songs, just because who I am.
And I love the idea that if the record is tanking next time around, you can just chuck a load of explosions on it and like dog barks and stuff.
Yeah.
You're a local to Manchester, and there's like banners up around Piccadilly Records and stuff, which must be cool in itself. On the flip side of that, with these records, you know, you've got to put up with all the faff of social media and stuff. You're pretty much off the socials in a sense, you know, and then come back for the new record. How is it having that juxtaposition of these really cool things like banners and all this, you know, promotional work, to then have to do these little videos to camera and stuff?
I don't like doing the social stuff. Jess, my partner, has been a godsend for many reasons, and one of the reasons is she's good at that stuff, or at least
doesn't hate it.
Yeah, well, she let's say reminds me to do it. So I don't fall below some kind of standard. I don't get any real joy out of it. I feel like I empty my creative bucket every 2 years, and again, not wanting to do things kind of half-assed. When I think of like social media stuff, I kind of my brain first goes to like these grand things that we can do, and then I kind of just end up having to talk into the camera, and I hate selling myself. And hey, the vinyl's out, you know. It's just like it's not fun for me. But you know, the album's done pretty well again with sales, and I know a lot of that's from social media and mailing lists and things. And I know from hearing about other artists that have stopped doing that, who their albums, and you know, big names, and their albums come out and they don't get in the top 100, and
Really?
They're like, well, what's happened? It's like, what happened is your fucking fans don't know your album's out. Because it's some people at the label told me about this too, just in the past year, really, that these companies have made it like virtually impossible to access your own fans because they're trying to get you to do sponsored this and that, sponsored posts.
Branded content and stuff.
Yeah, and like, you know, if I want to get to the same amount of fans that I got to 5 years ago, you have to pay $10 a day to get it boosted and all this shit, and it's maddening. But there's people that, you know, that work in mines, you know, so, you know, it's just kind of a necessary evil.
Yeah. I always think with that sort of thing as well. Hello, do you want to come up?
Yeah, he'll probably.
Yeah. This is Frank who wants to come up, not
Frank.
not Brian.
Francis. Hey.
If you want to come up, hit sir. Yeah.
He wants you to pick him up.
Oh. It's going to be difficult with this cable.
You just do it under his armpits.
Ready? Whoa. Okay. Don't get this with Zoom. Okay. But I always think with that sort of thing, it's, you know, you go, oh, I hate TikTok, and I mean, I've never been on TikTok, but it's not you that it's about, is it? It's the person who's receiving it. So yeah, I understand the need.
Yeah, and it's just about, I don't know, there has to be some minimal loss of integrity, right? Because you think of some people that you admire from back in the day, even though they didn't have social media. No, I don't know if Brian Wilson would have been on TikTok, or Kurt Cobain, or, I mean, not saying I'm these people, but yeah. So it's a tough one, but it's the world we live in. I think you can have two choices. You can have total, all-encompassing integrity, or you can allow yourself to have to lose a little bit and still have a job.
Yeah. In that respect, I noticed like a few things were bench, like live streams and in stores, you know, for focusing on your health and well-being. It must be nice saying that about the fans, that you do seem to have a fan base and an audience that are willing to back you up and, you know, give you that sort of strength. That must be nice to have that sort of feeling.
Yeah, my fans in particular, because of my music and the themes that I sing about, are much more in tune to like mental health and the importance of kind of like self-love and things. And my fans are a little bit older than the fans of fucking Wet Leg or something, you know.
You'd be surprised, I reckon. But yeah.
So yeah, it's a really cool community that we've built together. And I just got off this in-store tour, and I heard, you know, a story a night about how much my music's meant to them, or how this, you know, I met my wife at your show, or, you know, my health's not doing great, and this is really helping me get through. And all of those things, for whatever reason, I still can't kind of figure out, they make me very like kind of feel like humble and gracious, but it always makes me uncomfortable, because there's still like a percentage of me that feels like I've duped these people somehow. It's like there's a part of my brain that went, oh, they fell for it, you know. But I'm like, no, they genuinely like you. And they you know, and you mean something to them. I've been slower on that uptake of being able to accept the fact that all of that is real. I don't know why.
Yeah, I suppose maybe as well because with your show coming up at the Apollo, it's because there's so many people now, rather than just you know, half a room at night and day or something. It's
Yeah. The thing is, as well, I've had plenty of time to get used to this, because I'm not an overnight sensation, and even just sort of my late, you know, whatever period this is now, where since I moved to Manchester, so the past 12, 13 years, which only kind of really takes up a little over half of my career really. But if you want to go back from the start, I mean, I was playing to nobody, and even 10 years ago, still kind of playing to nobody, but then kind of gradually built this thing where 100 people more came to the show over the last kind of decade or so. And through the pandemic, I was one of the first to be doing live streams during the pandemic, and that became like a big thing for me, doing it every Friday, and got a lot of fans that way. And that too kind of speaks to the previous question about the point about how fans
Consume.
yeah, and also how they interact with me. And now a lot of fans identify my music with this time of that was quite hard for a lot of people. And so yeah, and now we're to a point where we haven't played the show yet. There could be 8 people that show up at the Apollo, but assuming it's full, it's I have a tough time with it, if I'm being honest. I'm learning to accept that I deserve a lot of things in my life, and that's been a big part of this journey with being off drugs and stuff. I really don't know why there's this part of me that always feels like I don't deserve the things that I have, or if I haven't earned them, or if sometimes they're not enough. And I tend to try to change scenery a lot in my life, and my partner could speak to this, but I'll just like sit up one day and be like, I'm moving. Like, what? Like, I hate this yard. This yard's beautiful. Oh, get a better yard. Maybe just kind of trying to distract myself. But it's really a shame, because I know that the really much younger me would have killed to be able to stand in front of 4,000 or 5,000 people, and I need to learn how to accept it.
On that sort of frame of reference, the new record has come out, and you've said that it's been hard celebrating it due to not only what's going on in the world, but the themes of the record.
Mm-hmm.
That must be a strange thing to come to terms with, as well as what we've just been talking about.
I mean, I'm sure everyone feels this, right? It can't just be me, that the world seems fucking... Everything
Scary,
is
yeah.
so scary, but at the same time it feels like so many things are inconsequential. I feel much smaller in the grand scheme of things. Nobody knows what's true. Nobody knows what's going on tomorrow. The attention span of people is non-existent, which speaks to why a lot of artists right now are struggling to like sell tickets in advance, because people go, oh, November, the world might be over by then, So there's all that going on, and obviously geopolitical stuff that is horrifying. So the last thing I wanted to do was try to even remotely equate my personal problems with these larger issues. So it was a really delicate thing. That's why, it was one of the reasons why I didn't kind of come out with this record and say, this is what this is about, and woe is me, and this is... I don't have time for that myself. I know other people, if they wanted to get into what this record is about, they will listen to it, and those are the people that I want as fans. Anyway, so yeah, there was even my last record that was largely about a breakup. That's probably far more universal, and something that I didn't feel icky about going, hey everybody, this is what's happened to me. And the album cover was much more grand, and the songs a little bit more clear messaged, or just pop. I knew that wasn't going to be the case with this. I knew this was going to be more of a long game, this album. I think that probably more than my other albums, people will start discovering this as the years go by. But there was nothing about this campaign that called for a confetti cannon,
Yeah. The themes, which we've touched on a little bit. There's the sobriety, but there's also horrific childhood trauma. And with the record and going in so deep on something like that, it must be not I was about to say it must be mild. It must be wild. If it was mild, that'd be
wonderful.
That'd be even worse. But it must be wild having to talk about something like that at length if you choose to. And it made me think of the thing that happened with St. Vincent a few years ago, where she released a record, and when she was asked about the lyrical content, she was like, "Oh, I'm not talking about that," and everyone was up in arms about it because it didn't make sense. But in hindsight, I completely understand why you'd want to release something but maybe not talk about it at length. Does that seem that you've maybe had to cover it quite a lot since the album's come out, or in the run-up, and it's just a strange sensation in doing such a...
Well, the thing is, I totally understand and respect her position there, but mine is probably quite the opposite. I made a decision way before the songs made it to tape that if I was going to do this, that I had to decide then and there that this was going to be a thing that everyone was going to know about me. And if I was not to drive myself insane talking about it, I had to say up front, okay, you're going to have to talk about this. We're diving in full force here. From my own artistic point of view, I don't think that I don't feel like I owe anybody my words other than my music, but I feel like I made this record for me. I made this record because I felt that it was time to open up this door, and the music is me, and that door is open. So I talk about it. I don't really separate myself from my music too often. Maybe I should more, but I knew going in that this was going to be difficult, and I made peace with that before the album came out. I was afraid, and I was saying to people that were close to me, like, "Oh God, it's coming out in 2 weeks, and people are going to know, and things," and I have a great support system there. But I knew it was coming, and I prepared for it, and I feel like in my particular case, it would be a little bit disingenuous to now back away from it, because, like I said, I made this record partly to be able to get to a point in my life where I could talk about it, and this record was just kind of a conduit to that. So, yeah, it's strange and it's painful, but if I wasn't ready to deal with all of those things, then I wouldn't have made this music.
And do you think, you said you've come to this position where you can talk about it. Do you think that it has been, like building up to that, where when you, decided to make the record, it had built up to the point where you could finally talk about it? Is that something that was going through your head quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started thinking about making the record about this, I knew that I couldn't make this particular record and have it be too much of a mystery what I was talking about. I mean, it had to be done in a interesting and artistic way where I wasn't, being too literal about everything. So the build up to making this record was finding a balance and finding a way that I could divulge as much as I could and personally feel okay with it. So it was a bit of a process of, is that too much? Am I ready to, there's a song where I actually name the person and use the name, and that was, I remember one particular moment where I thought, is this too far? But then I always had this voice in the back of my head that was like, all in, all in, all in. So by the time the record came out, I had already kind of processed most of the worries I had about this being something that was going to be talked about,
And I did find it interesting, that you said I imagine not just for yourself, but you said it's not meant to provide answers to questions on sobriety or questions about this trauma that you had when you were a youth, but it may very much help people in similar situations. And you did say, you know, that you've had fans say, it's helped me through this, your music, or we met when you played this. So has that been quite, I appreciate it's only just come out, but has that been quite beneficial, knowing that that may very well happen with a fan base?
It was one of the voices in my head that was telling me that this was going to be okay, because I think it was the right thing to do, certainly for myself, but knowing collaterally that this could have an impact on other people that was positive was another reason why that kind of all-in thing, why I kept listening to that voice. And yeah, I don't love music where the artist feels like they're qualified to give answers, you know, this kind of everything's gonna be okay, baby stuff. Like that turns me off quite quickly. I hope there's I don't think that there's any point on this record where it feels like I'm giving a lecture or giving anybody advice, because I wouldn't do that in real life about this, you know? The only thing that I could really offer is my story, and to be honest about it, and to be genuine. And I felt like if I did that, that people would pick up on that and know that they weren't being preached to, that they were being understood, you know. And that was certainly a big reason why I went through with it. Yeah.
Quick break in the interview just to give you a heads up about some of our previous episodes. From our first episode to our latest, we featured interviews with the likes of Proto Martyr, The Lovely Eggs, Anna Erhard, Chat Pile, The Future Heads, Public Service Broadcasting, Gang of Four, Joshua Idehen, The Jesus Lizard, and even snooker legend Steve Davis. Treat yourself and go back through the episodes. Be sure to tell all your friends and comrades too. Enjoy.
And with the record itself, we've kind of talked about the dynamics around it. Like with Last Rotation of Earth, that squeaked into the top 40 of the charts. And you quite rightly highlighted that with these records, it's not like you're, you know, going up against contemporaries. You're going up against like Taylor Swift and Elton John reissues or huge stars. That must spur you on as well when you've got a record going into the top 40 and a record that's, you know, in contention to go into the top 40 and what have you. So that must feel pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool that you can have a record about. Let me rephrase. Not pretty cool. It is wild.
It's interesting.
It's interesting that you could have a record about that is set in the scene of a tent and a young boy being abused, and for it to go up, you know, punch for punch with songs that are about fucking at a party. You know, it's kind of like, it's wild, but it kind of restores a little bit of my faith in humanity, and at least artistically, and the kind of shared consciousness that we have with a lot of insightful people, and I assume a lot of people that are on journeys where, I hate that fucking word, but on journeys where they're trying to make sense of the world and themselves, and perhaps we need music that is not just about fun games, and it's not just a pastime. It's something that's a device that we use to navigate the world, and I'm happy to be a small part of that. Yeah.
I was interested in something you kind of mentioned, going a little bit off topic, but with the theme of the record, about the sobriety and going to clubs and venues and old faces
Yeah.
not quite understanding that you may have not be the BC Camplight of old. Riders are notoriously crates of beer. Sometimes payment is crates of beer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the way like the industry is slanted in respect of that sort of thing?
Well, I want to just make something clear for this article that I've been off drugs for 2 years. I've tried to state in every interview that alcohol's never really been my big thing, and I still have a beer here and there. I don't binge or anything, so I know that alcoholism is a big, huge issue, and I don't want to offend anybody who's battling that and then sees me with a Stella. You know? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great people in everywhere and in music, but the industry's a bit fucked, and it's awful. It's still particularly awful to women. I mean, there's a lot more people that are more qualified to speak about that than I, but I mean, even I witness it when, you know, if I'm walking on stage with my partner and the sound techs are asking me where her things should go and things like that. So there's still a lot of kind of archaic attitudes. Yeah, and I've been close friends with bands that the industry has fucked with drugs and alcohol. They've essentially bought them off, or, you know, young kids that were like, wow, we're in the music now, and next thing you know that there's promoters and agents buying them things that they shouldn't have, and that kind of probably in turn forms a loyalty from these kids to these adults that should know better, and that's sad. I feel a little guilty with my indulgence of being a part of that. I mean, there was times on stage where I was on mic asking the audience for Coke numbers. You know what I mean? So it's like, I played into that, and I accept that. But I would like to think that there's a way to, just like in other movements that are gaining traction, to make music and the arts a little bit safer for people that are first coming up, because God knows I fell for it. I mean, and it took me 15 years to get out of it. So there's a lot of work there to be done. But I do certainly run into people in my social life and in music that, you know, maybe they didn't hear that episode on Six Music, or they didn't read the interview, and they see me and I know their first thought is like, oh, I should get a bump off of that guy. You know, and so you know, I accept that, and that's something I'm dealing with. But you hear about the music business being this dangerous, faceless, soulless thing, and I'm here to say that it kind of is. I have wonderful people that I'm so lucky to be with Bella Union, and they're just great, supportive people, you know, but they couldn't be my babysitters. They weren't able to follow me around and see the way that I was conducting
It'll
my
find
life.
a way
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
come out.
Yeah. So I think things need to change. I feel really bad for bands that are coming out now for so many reasons. Firstly, that they don't know anything but social media, and by the nature of what social media is, it's about the acceptance and likes of other people, and that mentality in itself is so dangerous. And yeah, like I said, if you don't have 100,000 followers and you're a new band, people aren't going to take a chance on you. You don't have a catalog like I do. If I had to go find, you know, God forbid, had to go find another label, I have a body of work that I could say, here, that this is my resume. These bands don't have that. They have, this is how many followers I have, and that's such a shitty thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel bad, and I would just you know, it sounds naive, but I would just kind of implore these people to just really, really focus on getting really good at what they do, and cross all your fingers and toes that it's appreciated, you know.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to end on, because you've brought up your partner a few times, you know, you've obviously gone through tough times over the past couple of years with coming to terms with all this and still continuing on, but that seems to have been something that's shone through, is, you know, your partner Jess, and it must be such a joy slash a bit of a worry to embark on an endeavour, you know, where you're both musically minded and Tara on the record, but it must be such a thrill being able to have her, you know, appear throughout the record and back you up on these moments. That must be.
Yeah, well, it's a big deal for me. I'm about as close to a control freak as you can get with music, and like I said, I don't view music as a collaborative thing, because I just view it as this auditory extension representation of my life. So, but I guess now that my life has become a little bit more of a collaborative thing with Jess, that it made sense to make the music reflect that. So that was a big deal for me, and with Jess, but certainly with other people, and getting other people's voices and opinions on the music and letting that in was a big step for me. And because I always had this kind of mantra that if this is gonna suck, it's gonna be good because I made it suck, and if this is gonna be great, it's because I made it great. And I think that only took me so far. And then even with just kind of like guest appearances with Abigail on this album, I kind of went back and forth in my head for ages if that was something that I wanted to do, and I think that turned out great. So I've learned some lessons here. Yeah, hopefully long may it continue.
But that's great, Brian. Thank you so much, and I've really enjoyed this hour of Frank on my lap.
He's asleep, by the way.
Is he actually asleep?
His eyes are closed, yeah.
Oh. I'm glad that he's also not as much of a shedder as my George.
Yeah.
But yeah, really appreciate it.
Do you mind if I take a picture of him like that?
Absolutely, yeah. Why don't I just stop this so I can unclip it?
Yeah.